All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Kipcon's webinar on evaluating and remediating your asphalt pavement within your communities. My name is Melissa Wrubel, and I've been with Kipcon for about 15 years. Let me see if I can figure out how to advance my screen. There we go. Been with Kipcon for about 15 years. I've been in the industry for a couple of decades now. I started out in design years ago, designing roadways, new roadways for different types of developments, some of which were multifamily communities, which is largely what Kipcon is involved with today. I still do some design every now and then, but the bulk of my work as regards roadway asphalt is for remediation. And that's specifically what we're focused on here today. You have existing roadways that are aging, and at some point you will need to remediate those roadways. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's talk about what asphalt pavement is made up of. There's all kinds of different pavements, and when you're referring to pavement in general, you might mean a concrete pavement or an asphalt pavement. Asphalt pavement can go by several names. We have flexible asphalt here. Sometimes it's called bituminous concrete, although the word concrete is in there. It's not a stone with more mortar-based pavement. It's when the word bituminous is in there, it means that you're using a base that is oil-based. Like when you look at a roadway, you see that it has a darker surface. So we're talking about a flexible bituminous pavement here. So there's several layers to asphalt um, pavement. So on the bottom, underneath everything, you have your native soil, or perhaps if you are in a larger developed community, it's built on fill when they have to bring in dirt to help grade the site and then compact that. That is underlying all of the pavement in the community. And then there's a subbase. Subbase is usually made out of, it could be made out of several materials depending upon what the conditions are underneath it. So if there is a drainage issue in the community, sometimes it would, you might see if you were to dig down, you might see a gravel underneath there. Most times though, in New Jersey, what you'll find if you dig down and you look at that subbase is what's called a dense graded aggregate, and they often abbreviate that as DGA. In Pennsylvania, it's called 2A, but it's essentially a mix of busted up stone and stone dust, so that when it's compacted, it makes a very um, stable and a high bearing ratio base for the asphalt. It's not asphalt itself, but it's an aggregate course made out, meaning that it's made out of rocks, basically. Base course, now we're getting into our asphalt courses. So sometimes you'll see 2 or 3 courses of asphalt in the original design of a roadway, depending again on what the conditions are. But in general, there's a base course or base courses. And these courses are differentiated from the top courses that you can actually see at the surface by aggregate size, meaning aggregate again, meaning rocks. You usually have some sort of bituminous material, again, that asphaltic material with stone mixed in with it. The base course has larger stone in it. It tends to be thicker than the surface course. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but it needs to be thick enough to make that size of rock, or allow that size of rock to be effective in that asphalt course. So then you have your surface course. Sometimes it's called a wearing course, but it tends to be a little thinner. The rock size is smaller in it, and it's a smoother, and true to its name, it's a wearing course, because that's the course that's going to get beat up. And when you remediate a roadway, you're going to remove that beat up surface layer and replace it. Sometimes you need to repair what's underneath it, but that's essentially what you're doing when you're remediating a roadway. So because we are largely today talking about multifamily communities where you have an internal roadway, perhaps, that is the responsibility of your association to maintain and replace as it ages. We're talking today about usually a common element within your community. Roadways, roofing, siding, they're all large dollar projects. They're usually the largest within a multifamily community. So the reserve study, if you keep it updated and keep updating it regularly so that you can plan for things for the future. You can look at your reserve study. And again, a reserve study is not a schedule for replacement. This is a budgetary tool. However, as the roadway is nearing the end of its useful life, you will typically see that it's starting to become a maintenance issue. You're always crack filling or seal coating or filling potholes. But on the reserve study, you also see that it's nearing the end of its useful life. And again, in a reserve study that's kept regularly updated, those funds are there for that project. When it comes time to do that project, you have been reserving over the years to do that project. So again, because a reserve study is not a schedule for replacement, you might want to, it might be obvious, it might just be in bad shape, but sometimes we have communities that contact us and they say, hey, we're coming to the end of our useful life, but can you take a look at it and tell us what you think? Can we do it in stages? Should we do everything at once? Is it worth putting off a couple of years? So you can consult an engineering firm and we can come out and do a visual observation of those roadways to see what kind of condition they're in. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we're looking for when we're doing a visual observation. So I want a couple of caveats to this particular slide here. So it says timing is everything. And it's based on cost of material, labor cost, and available reserves funds. So yes, available reserve funds is often a major factor for multifamily communities. And you can phase a project. You could do it all at once. You could bid it both ways, actually, in the same bidding process, and take a look at what the difference in cost is for your community to phase it over maybe 3 or 4 years if you have a large community, or to do the project at once. And you can compare costs and make a business decision based on that. Cost of material and labor costs do factor in, and they do change from year to year. But when you need to do a roadway project, there's really no way to predict the future. And I have often received the question, well, if we wait till next year, will it be more expensive or less expensive? And I don't know the answer to that. All I know is, as all things in the way of the world, are that they change. So costs go up and they go down. They tend to rise over time. And the same thing with the cost of asphalt and labor costs. So again, doing your research, it's good for information purposes, just to see historically how things have changed. Again, you don't really have control over what happens in the future, but the cost, the material cost of the asphalt is tied to the index. It's published if you're interested in looking by the Department of Transportation, and they put out monthly, and I think it's bi-monthly now, the index, the price index. It is not a one-to-one ratio. You need X amount of asphalt replaced, so you multiply it by what's in the index and you get the price. That's not how it works. It is typically contractor material pricing for the asphalt, which is one of many components of your project. Is they'll take a look at the index. As a matter of fact, when we bid it out, we ask for what that index is at the time of the bidding. And if there is a substantial change, either up or down, between the time that the project is bid and the time that the project is executed, especially for multi-phase projects, there may be an adjustment based on what that factor is. Again, it's not a one-to-one. The index fell by $50, so we get $50. It's the contractor pricing is based on that index. There is a formula for that, which I won't get into here. But I will tell you that sometimes there is a substantial difference, again, either up or down, between the time that you bid a project and the time that you execute that project. So when planning a pavement remediation project, timing is important. And again, we talked about reserve funds and condition of pavement, those types of things. I will tell you that if you're planning a pavement remediation project based on the time of year it is, you want to plan for either this year or next year. So I will tell you, it's very late in the season right now. We are wrapping up projects that were started middle of last summer, meaning that that's when the association engaged with us to come out and perform visual observations and put together specifications. So the timeline from that initial engagement with an engineer to completing the project, or even the first phase of the project, can be a year in some cases. If you're working on a phased project, it's over several years. So keeping that in mind, if you're planning a project for next year, between now and the end of the year is a perfect time to call up your engineer and get the process started. We often get emergency calls in April or May. We need to get this done this year, and sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. Your engineer, the only portion of a project that they have control over the timeline is that design period for the specifications, and when the deadline for the bid is, and getting those bids together and getting them to the community. From there, it's a matter of the time it takes to select your contractor, getting a schedule from the contractor, getting a start date from the contractor. So you have to keep in mind that when you're planning a project like this, that you need to give sufficient time. You need to allow sufficient time for that design process, that bidding process, and getting a contract with a contractor in place. So I just wanted to emphasize that. So now we're going to dig into the nuts and bolts of the remediation process. And there's several steps to it, as I mentioned. And this is over the arc of the life of the component, in this case, the roadways. So when it's time to replace pavement, the beginning of the process is, as I mentioned, that visual evaluation. We'll talk about each of these a little bit more. Then you're going to prepare specifications. You're going to put that project out to bid and get contractor bids for that. You're going to then look at those bids and compare them and select a contractor, get a contract in place with a contractor to come and perform that work. Now, once that work is performed, you're going to have a beautiful pavement, but it doesn't end there. The importance of maintenance, I cannot overemphasize. It's not uncommon for stress cracks to form in absolutely well done pavement over the course of the first several years of that pavement being installed. It's just the nature of the material. I just want to put in here and mention here that asphalt that was installed 30, 40 years ago is different than asphalt that's being installed today. So it still does its job, but it's the nature of the material is a little different. 40 years ago, there was a lot less recycled product in the asphalt. They were using a different kind of mix in the asphalt, same materials, but a different mix. If you think about, if you buy, a box of cake mix, you can, mix in 2 eggs or 4 eggs, or 2 cups of sugar, a quarter cup. It's all the same materials, but it's in a different mix, and it performs a little differently. Plus, with the recycled material that is being added back in, it does perform a little differently. So that's why I wanted to mention that maintenance is especially important, because you need to take a look at where you need to perform maintenance as the pavement ages, even beginning in those first couple of years, and then over time as the pavement starts to age and become more brittle and deteriorate. So let's go through in detail the process. So evaluation is the first step. You make a decision to investigate whether you need to do a remediation project, so you engage with an engineer. And again, that can be, we don't know if we should do a pavement project. We should have an engineer come and take a look at it and let us know, based on the visual observation, whether we are ripe for such a project or if we have a couple of years. But also, we can do this in conjunction with specifications. If you know you are ready to do a roadway project and you call up the engineer, we start with a visual observation. That's always the starting point. And we'll talk about what we're looking for when we do that visual observation. But we're reviewing what we can see in terms of surface deterioration. We're looking at drainage patterns. And I want to mention a little something about that. We review traffic loads. And then when we're ready to do specifications, if we're doing these observations as part of a specification prep, we always do core tests, and we'll talk a little bit about those as well. I will tell you that when we're looking at drainage patterns, very important that if you've engaged with an engineer, I would strongly recommend that you meet with them before they begin observations to do a walkthrough. You could either have a list of areas or you can know where there's a problem. Point that out to your engineer because it is not always visually evident to us where drainage problems are. So if you have a known problem somewhere, point that out to your engineer, bring that to their attention so they can potentially either take care of that as part of the pavement project or make a further recommendation of what needs to be done before a pavement project can be undertaken. So always bring that to their attention. Always do an initial walkthrough with your engineer. Same thing with traffic loads. In multifamily communities, I see a lot of areas in front of like dumpster stations, dumpster enclosures where the refuse trucks come in. Same thing, they come into the community, have to make a sharp turn. The weight of that refuse truck or heavy delivery trucks over and over again can take a toll on pavement. So in some communities where it's completely just getting beat up, we may put in the specifications that we're going to treat that area a little differently in the remediation, either by thickening up the pavement structure or putting in perhaps a concrete pavement. A lot of times the inside of the dumpster area is actually paved with asphalt, and just from the constant lifting up and putting down of those dumpsters, it just gets beat up over time. It might be a case where putting in a reinforced concrete in those areas might be a better solution. So that's what I mean by traffic loads. If the pavement's getting beat up because of either the weight of the vehicles or impacts, you want to review those areas as well. So what are we looking for when we do a visual observation? I'm just going to give you some, just a sort of a bird's eye view of what we're looking for. There are other considerations, but there are some items that might be quite obvious. So, of course, potholes and areas where you can see that surface course has gotten deteriorated, has gotten beaten away, either by traffic loads or by freeze thaw. Once that surface course begins to deteriorate and the cracks open, they're not maintained, the water can get in there. Water will eventually get in there anyway, it's just the nature of pavement, but that crack sealing is important because the least water you can allow into your pavement as it ages, the longer life you're going to get out of it. So freeze thaw plays a big role in the formation of potholes. So we're looking for this. We're looking for areas where these potholes may be forming, gives us an indication of maybe areas where we're going to need some base repair. Oftentimes when potholes form, you're now getting water into the base and the base is starting to become deteriorated as well. Again, here are some cracks in the pavement. So when pavement is young, asphalt just shrinks as it gets older. It's just how the material happens or ages. There are certain types of cracks that form first. Seam cracking, if you stand in the center line of the road and you look down the center of the road, oftentimes you'll see cracks starting to open up in a couple of years, 5-10 years after pavement is installed. And that's where when the contractor installs the asphalt, they have to pave one side of the road, then they have to pave the other side of the road because the screed is only so wide. So that seam, they try to seal that seam as well as they can. I see they often do a very good job of sealing that seam, but just because pavement shrinks, it's going to look for that weakest point, and that seam is oftentimes the weakest point. So when your pavement is just starting to age, you can manage those cracks. You could see there's some crack fill or crack fill on here. Once those cracks start to get a little wider, a quarter inch or more, is when you want to start thinking about doing some different repairs on there, on some localized repairs. There's different ways you can remediate that. I won't get into that here, but just know that those cracks do open up over time. And yes, they need to be maintained, that there's a point at which the maintenance becomes cost prohibitive, and you need to start thinking about either localized repair or a pavement project. Alligator cracking, and you can see why they call it alligator cracking. It looks like the skin on an alligator, and this is a pretty clear indication that the sub base, remember the sub base is that layer of asphalt that you can't see, that sub base is I'm sorry, base course is starting to deteriorate as well. So, or the underlying sub base or soils underneath might have a diminished bearing capacity. Maybe a lot of water is getting in. Maybe the nature of the soils underneath, if they're very clayey, they can fail over time, and it takes that top course, large areas of top course with it, and you get this alligator cracking that forms. This is a clear indication. If I'm walking out on a site and I see this, I know that this is an area where there's a high probability that you're going to have to do some base repairs here, meaning excavating down, taking out all the old layers, and rebuilding that pavement from beneath. Here's some other types of cracks. I mentioned seam cracks below. We mentioned alligator cracks, reflective cracks. So there is, I think it's the next slide. I'm just going to skip ahead here to show you this. Oftentimes, instead of doing a full pavement remediation, maybe at the time the pavement is in need of attention, there's not enough funds, or for a variety of factors, a community may choose to just overlay what's there. I am not a big fan of this, and you'll see why. Overlays, it's usually an overlay is, well, when you do a remediation project, you're milling off that top course and you're putting back new asphalt. When an overlay is done, oftentimes they will just overlay what's there, or just do some minor repairs to the already deteriorated top course and put another inch or inch and a half of asphalt over it. This is a Band-Aid approach to doing this, and you will in time, in a very, very short period of time, start seeing reflective cracks coming up, meaning that where there is deterioration in that top course, now all of a sudden your new overlay, which looks very nice for a short period of time, now all those cracks that you were trying to avoid on your original roadway are now coming up through that top course, because it's at remember, pavement is going to fail at its weakest point. You're going to start to see cracks open up at its weakest points. So all those cracks start coming up through your overlay. So that's what you see here on the top. These were old seam cracks in the roadway and old transverse cracks. These are cracks that appear because of just asphalt shrinking over time. It gets overlaid, those cracks start to come up again through all of those locations. This is a common one in communities where they're doing their first asphalt remediation. So oftentimes you'll see very noticeable settlement around the grates in the roadway catch basins that are along the curb, or maybe even in areas where you have a type E or a type A. Oh, those are the big square ones, or the rectangular ones in the middle of the pavement that are not along the curb. You may see some settlement around those catch basins start to occur. Again, it's very visible. You could see in this one, you could see that there's the water that's going in there during storms is depositing all the silt around the grate here. So the main cause of this, there could be several reasons that this can be happening. However, the majority of times what happens is because it's the first time the pavement is being remediated, you're dealing with the original construction. Now, when communities are originally constructed, the contractor can do the best job but you can get the greatest contractor with the best equipment doing the best job he can to compact around these inlet boxes. And because it has to be done manually, they can't use the big equipment to compact like they can on the larger site. So doing they're using smaller equipment to compact the soil around the inlet boxes. That in the inlet, by the inlet boxes, I mean, if you were to look in this curb piece here, you would see the concrete box that's underneath this structure. And when they compact the soil around that, it still consolidates over time. It's just the nature of soil. The contractor can do the best job during construction, and you still may see consolidation over time. And it takes, of course, that asphalt with it. Sometimes you'll see actually a little void open up, or maybe a large void open up next to the grate. Those are areas that need to be addressed as well. And if a void opens up, it can be attributable to this initial consolidation of soil, or it can be a larger problem like a pipe connection problem. And again, that's something we would need to look at on a case-by-case basis if we're going to do a roadway remediation project. So when you're doing a roadway project, you're also, keep in mind, looking at the curbing, you're looking at the drainage structures within the roadway, and a couple of other items that should be done in conjunction with a remediation project, because they are all items that support the longevity of that asphalt pavement. We talked about raveling of overlay. Now, beyond visual observation, because our initial observations are visual in nature, we're evaluating things that we can see. There are things that we cannot see. So we want to get an idea of what's happening beneath the surface. So we always do core sample testing when we're putting together specifications. And the reason for that is we want
What is your plan? Oh, okay.
Number one, we want to see what is the structure of that existing pavement. So we're looking to see what's the thickness of the top course. Remember keeping in mind those layers that we talked about in the beginning. We want to see how thick is the top course, how thick is the base course, how thick is that rock subbase that we have underneath. In some cases, if there is a lot of problems with seepage, there's also a little bit of a water test that can be done to see. It's very rudimentary. It's not scientific, but a lot of times the coring company can do a little water test to see if there is perhaps some problems with the subsurface drainage when they do the core sample testing. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the structure of the pavement. I want to point out that there is a misconception that the core testing, we're doing core testing to find out why the pavement is failing. So I want to point out that it can tell us why pavement is failing in some cases. Maybe it's too thin, maybe there's a water condition underneath, but we're first and foremost, we're doing the core testing so that we can determine the existing structure of the pavement, because it can have a bearing on how we approach the remediation specifications. So if we do core testing and we see that the pavement is we see alligator cracking through the whole thing, and we do pavement core testing, that core testing may give us a clue to why that alligator cracking is happening. For example, instead of having a nice maybe 4-inch base and 2-inch top course, there may be only 2 inches of asphalt, a single layer of 2-inch asphalt overall. We've seen communities, oftentimes older communities, that have minimal asphalt, and they really need to, instead of doing a mill and overlay, you can't mill pavement that is very, very thin. What you need to do is you need to excavate and you need to reconstruct that pavement. I would say that communities that are usually 35, 40 years old, We don't see a lot of that. It's the older communities. A lot of times you'll see garden apartments that were built in the 50s and the 60s. Oftentimes their roadway pavement is very thin because that's what they did back then. So in those cases, the core samples are telling us, you know, this project needs to be a reconstruction. I will tell you, we always do core samples because there are surprises. We're trying to minimize surprises when we do core samples. Um, and I will tell you that the cost difference between a mill and overlay and a reconstruction is oftentimes double or sometimes more. So you want to be aware of that going in. It doesn't change the circumstances, but it does change your awareness of what this type of project might cost for your particular community. And just here's some examples of what those core samples look like. Um, uh, they're not very disruptive. It's a 4-inch auger and they go down through all the asphalt layers. They try to auger down through the that rock subbase that I mentioned to see how thick that is. Um, and it gives us some information on what we're dealing with when we put together the specifications. So the specifications, what are they? They define the scope of work for what we're doing. So the specifications are put together and the project manual are put together specifically for the purpose of bidding out the work to contractors. So if you go to a contractor without any specifications or a plan, you can go to 5 different contractors, get 5 different scopes of work with 5 different prices, and then how do you choose? How do you know what you're doing? So putting together specifications, there's a couple benefits to that. You get a set of professional eyes on what is going on in your community to make the recommendations for the best course forward that you have to give you the best product. Also, when you put that project out to bid, you are getting bids from contractors that are based on the same scope of work that you can compare across the board and you can see what you are being offered for the same scope of work. And I won't get into the nuts and bolts of bidding here. We do a separate webinar on that, which we can discuss the details. I can give that webinar as well, on which we can discuss the details of how to look at bids and analyze them. But just know that putting together specifications helps that bidding process tremendously. So the specifications also, as we discussed, take into account related considerations. So there are areas that we know we see maybe extensive alligator cracking or subsidence, or just the pavements really beat up. We know that we're going to need to do subbase remediation in those areas. The specifications can include that and address that. Same thing with curb replacement, whether you have segmental concrete curb or you have granite block curb. Those curbs take a beating over time, and they need to be removed and replaced eventually. It may not be throughout the entire community, but there are areas where maybe trucks drive over them or the plow hits them year after year. In the case of concrete curb, they can start to scale or spall over time just from road salts. So those should be included as part of the project, again, because they support that pavement structure. That's when you want to take care of it. Drainage structures, they oftentimes, because of road salts, especially if you have concrete, I'm sorry, drainage structure boxes that are constructed out of block and mortar, they take a beating at it over time from road salts, traffic loading, things like that. The precast boxes do a little better, but the block certainly gets beat up over time. And that mortar course that's underneath that steel frame where the grate sits, that takes a beating as well. So you want to take care of those items as part of a pavement project. Sidewalk ramps, again, come up as well. So a lot of times where that concrete sidewalk ramp comes down, oftentimes it meets the curb, and if the curb is beat up and it needs to be replaced, oftentimes you have to take out that sidewalk ramp and replace it too. It's just problematic to replace a curb without replacing the pavement that's adjacent to it. So sidewalk ramps will oftentimes be considered in a pavement project. And again, we talked about remediation techniques, milling and overlay. Again, if you've got a nice thick pavement there and the top course, it's time to replace that, you can mill it and you can put down a new top course on top of it. Pavement reconstruction comes into play again when you've got that thin pavement that there's no support underneath it. You want to get a nice thick pavement underneath it. Also in areas that take a beating where we discussed refuse trucks that come in, or now we've got these big delivery trucks that come in, and the pavement just gets beat up. It's not taking just regular residential traffic in some cases. Another part of the specification is the project manual. So this is a written manual. We have the contract drawings, which everybody associates with special specifications, and those are the graphical documents that you can look at that the contractor uses to orient themselves on the project and look at the scope of work on a project. Then there's also, in conjunction with that, the project manual, and that's where the bid forms reside. So we have the bid forms are based on the scope of work that's in the contract drawings, and they are, again, I don't want to get into too much detail here, but there is a base bid. The base bid is, those are the items that you know that you absolutely need to do there's no question that it's going to be done as part of the project. You're going to essentially mill off the top of that pavement, put back the top of that pavement. Maybe there are some other items that you know you need to do. Maybe you need to change out the grates and the curb pieces in the community. The grates, oftentimes in older communities, the older style grates. We've got a lot of bicycle riders. They're a liability because the thinner bicycle tires now get stuck in those little slots, and it can be hazardous. So limiting your liability in the community, you want to replace those with the bicycle safe grates that bicycle riders and pedestrians can walk over them without much of a problem. Also curb pieces, there used to be the big open arch on the front. Now with people are more conscious of allowing debris into the stormwater system. So those curb pieces now have smaller openings on them to keep debris out, not just large branches from storms. They won't keep sediment out, but they'll keep large branches out, the coffee cups blowing around, those kind of things. And you want to keep that larger debris out of your storm sewer system because it can cause blockages. So that's the eco grates, or I'm sorry, the eco N curb heads, as they call them, are part of that replacement. So again, just to the point, the base bid is the portions of the project you know you're going to do. There are some unforeseen conditions that typically come up over and over again in pavement projects. You might not know you have to do them until you mill that top course off. So we ask for unit pricing for those items that are typically encountered during a project. There's always surprises. There's always some other things that, I shouldn't say always, but occasionally there are other items that come up that we don't have pricing for. They're a complete surprise. But we have a pretty comprehensive list of items that can come up during the project. They may not be part of what you know you need to do, but they can come up. And so we ask for unit prices for those upfront, that in the event they are encountered, you have pricing for that already. And also, again, as I mentioned, when you are using a bid form and putting that out to bid, you have a consistency between the way the pricing is being presented, so that you can be assured that every contractor is giving you prices for exactly what you want done. Project manual also contains some general conditions that are specific to pretty much every project. The conditions that you want to have, warranty considerations, and what happens if there are punch list items, things of that nature. And then there's special conditions that might be more specific to the project that we're doing, regarding say items that you're using that are or materials that you're using that are specific to that project. So the general conditions and special conditions cover that within the project manual. And there's separate sections on each of those in the project manual. So again, we talked about additional work. Oh, driveways. That's a good one. So driveway pavement is different than roadway pavement. So if you have a community where the association is responsible for not only the roadways but the driveways, you want to make sure, keeping in mind that when you're remediating a community, you want to start with the things in the back first. So what I mean by that is, say, for example, your community needs roofing replaced, they need driveways replaced, and they need roadways replaced, just as an extreme condition. You want to do those projects in the order that when you're done with one project, you're not driving over or using in any way that finished component to do your next component. So in my example, you want to do roofs first. You know you got to do roofs. Do those first because you got heavy trucks coming out. Asphalt shingles are very heavy. You're going to be driving over your roadway. Get that out of the way first. Then driveways. Driveways have a different construction than the roadways. And to remediate those driveways, you're going to have to drive over those roadways with asphalt trucks to get to those driveways. So you want to do your driveway project next. Then tackle the roadways last. If you're doing a phased project, you want to start, and we always try to keep in mind not only where the roadways are in a community in a phased project, but the condition that they're in. Ideally, you want to start in the back of the community, the cul-de-sacs, the areas that you're not going to drive over again as you move out of the community with each phase. So it's important to keep in mind. So you may have a really beat up entry roadway, and some less beat up cul-de-sacs in the back. You still want to do those cul-de-sacs first. You might want to just kind of in the first couple of years or year, just do some light localized repairs to that entrance roadway just to keep it functional. But you want to start in the back and you want to move forward and then maybe end up in your last phase with that entry roadway. Even though it's in the worst condition, that's your path in and out of the community. So you want to protect that as you're moving through your project. All right, and so we're coming up to the end, and then I'll do some Q&A. So we've got about 17 minutes left. So I'm just going to finish up the presentation, and then I'm going to move on to Q&A. So here's just a sample drawing of the specifications. We talked about those contract drawings. Here are some sample details, different things you might encounter. Again, milling and overlay. That's the bottom left detail there. That's what they're going to do. They're going to mill off the top and put back. We have in the upper right a full depth repair. If we know that there are areas that we're going to have to dig down and do a full depth repair on the pavement, that's the detail for that. Also, you're going to have areas in your community where your new pavement ends up with old pavement. That might be between project phases or where the project ends at, say, a municipal roadway. And how is that to be treated? So whenever you are doing a hard stop on a phased project or at a municipal pavement, you want to construct that in such a way that you're not going to get that reflective seam cracking up through what's underneath. So you kind of overlay your top course. You want to kind of overmill a little bit and then overlay so that you have a lapped seam in those areas there. And then there's a striping detail on the bottom right there. Most times, unless you specify it, the contractor will do like a spray on striping. There are cases where we've been asked to put in a thermoplastic paint either in all or some areas of the community. Thermoplastic paint does, it kind of, if you look at older thermoplastic paint, it kind of peels and bubbles over time. This is a material that they lay down over the asphalt, where the painted striping, it's a little more cost effective if you're going to be seal coating and repainting as part of your maintenance program. This is just an example of the bid form. I'm not going to get into this here. And as I said, we have a whole separate webinar on this where we get into the nuts and bolts on this. But just know that specifications make the bidding process much more easy to analyze the results. So when you're selecting a contractor, you might be there are very there are various ways you want to look at the bids in selecting a contractor. So I will tell you that if you're working with an engineer that works with multifamily communities, they typically have a bid list, contractors that they know are quality contractors that that are going to do a good job. In that case, if you know you've got quality contractors, the engineer has experience with all of them, you may want to select on price. There are other considerations, of course, but in that case, it comes down to pricing. There are schedule considerations. I've had communities that want certain things done by a certain time each year. So part of that bidding process is asking the contractor if they can complete the work by a certain date. There's usually contingencies to that the contractor puts in, weather permitting and things like that, but schedule can be a driving factor in the selection. Experience, again, usually if you're using an engineer, they are including on their bid list contractors that they've worked with in the past and do quality work. And of course, references. So we ask for references. We don't follow up on them. If they're provided references, we ask for references and provide them for the benefit of the association if they want to take a look at, say, example work that contractor has done in another community. So that's there for the association's use. So once you have selected your contractor, you have a contract in place with that contractor, you're ready to begin work. I strongly recommend doing a pre-construction meeting before the construction begins to walk through and talk about, my apologies, to talk about certain considerations with the contractor. Where are they going to store their equipment? How will people get in and out while the work is in progress? How will the work be staged? Where will people park? Things to that nature. The contractor is responsible for the means and methods of construction. So they are responsible for how the work gets done, what type of equipment they use, the timeline, things like that. So you want to have that pre-construction meeting to handle those incidentals and those planning items before the construction begins. So the engineer also, you might choose to hire an engineer to administer the contract, meaning that if you choose to have an engineer on site during the construction period, what the engineer does is they are not there. Again, contractor is responsible for the means and methods. We're not directing traffic. We're not looking at how big their crews are, things like that. The contractor is responsible for that. What we are looking at when we're on site is we're looking at our own specifications and we're comparing the work that the contractor is doing to those specifications in comparison with that. Also, as I mentioned, there are unforeseen conditions. Sometimes the contractor may encounter something during the course of the work that's going to be extra to the contract. The engineer would take a look at that as well. Also, when invoices are submitted, we're comparing those invoices to the original bid. We're looking at any extras, and we're authorizing payment of all or a portion of those invoices. And also, we're keeping a punch list of items that we see. And also, it's very helpful if you are in a community, if you are either a community manager that is receiving comments during the course of the work, to keep track of what those are. And sometimes they are, because most people in communities are not contractors or engineers, they may see something that gives them pause or give them concern, which is just simply part of the process of construction. But sometimes there are legitimate concerns. So if you as a property manager are getting some comments, it's worth taking a look at what those comments are as part of the punch, in addition to your engineer's punch list items, just to make sure that there are no other concerns that are, and make sure that all the concerns are being addressed and that the project is being done properly. So just give you an example of this project might look like in your community. Every community is different, but this is generally what happens on the projects. I will tell you that it's messy, it's dusty, it's noisy, and oftentimes you might get questions about from residents about whether they're going to be inconvenienced. The answer is probably. However, if you endure over the couple of days that it takes to do each of these phases, you will have a beautiful pavement in the end. So the project usually starts out before this with any sort of concrete repairs. Usually a contractor will come in, any concrete curbing that needs to be done, those sidewalk ramps I mentioned, uh, perhaps there are repairs to the catch basin boxes that need to occur. Concrete work usually gets done first. Then when the project starts, it'll start out with somebody in the waiting room here. The project starts out with milling first. So here's the miller, very noisy, very dusty. And they mill off and they put the refuse into the back of the truck, as you see, and it gets carted off to be disposed of off-site. They do not store the millings on site. They are taken immediately off-site to the recycling center. Another thing you might see during this phase, and here in this picture, you see the top course is milled off. You see the lines from the milling machine, the little tiny stripes through the pavement. Now is the time too, once the top course is removed, you may see that there is some deterioration to the base course around the inlets. We talked about maybe some faulty pipe connections. Now is the time to excavate down and make those any repairs to any unforeseen conditions around the catch basins and the roadways. Another thing that happens is unforeseen conditions. You may need some base course reconstruction. In this case, you could see this along a flow line. On the left side is a parking bay. On the right side is the travel way and the roadway. Many times in the initial design, there is what they call a flow line. So all the water will flow to this point and then flow along the flow line to the nearest catch basin. These areas often take a beating. This is a lot of times where those seam cracks I mentioned open up as the pavement shrinks. Water gets in there with traffic or vehicles pulling in and out of these bays. Very, very beat up. So these are areas where often the base course will need to be repaired. In this particular picture, you can see where they've gone through. They've milled out probably a 2 or 3 foot strip in this area, and they have replaced the base course before putting the top course on. Crack repair for areas where the cracks are hairline cracks in the base course and the crack is closed and non-deteriorated. They will just reinforce those areas with a crack repair fabric before putting on the top course layer. And here's what it looks like when they lay down the asphalt. In this case here, they're putting down some base course. Then they'll go through, they'll roller compact it. In some areas that are confined, like the corner of this parking bay here, they have to hand rake it in and compact it by hand. This item is a little bit out of order, but here's where there's base course. They're about to put the top course down. You see them putting down a layer of tack coat. In this particular area, they're putting it down extra thick because you could see it's on a curve. They probably have issues with vehicles turning here. Maybe there was some slip failure of the top course in the past. They really want to adhere that top course to what's underneath it. So this is a little thick, but that there's probably a problem in this area. And here's the finished asphalt. The top course is installed. They are rolling it with the vibrational rollers. And here's the completed roadway. One of the things I want to draw your attention to is you will see on the left side, there looks like what is a rust colored blemish on the surface there. I will tell you that this can't be avoided. Oftentimes they have to keep those vibrational rollers hydrated, and they are made of metal. So sometimes you get this little kind of dusting or streaks that appear on the surface. They do dissipate over time. It's not a construction defect. It's an aesthetic concern that will fade. Again, here's a completed roadway. Here's that center line seam that I talked about. You can see it's compacted. And however, as this pavement shrinks over time, I'm sure you'll see a crack form in that area. Pavement striping is the very last that goes on. In our specifications, we always have them stripe it in the way that the existing striping occurred before the project began. And again, maintenance is very important. As that pavement ages, it's going to need some maintenance to ensure that you're going to get full useful life out of it. Obviously, as it gets older, it's not as pretty as when it was first installed, but that maintenance still is important. If you're crack sealing and you don't like the look of it, you always have the option of doing a seal coat over it. We don't recommend seal coating older pavement, though, for preservation of the pavement surface. If you're going to install seal coating in areas for the purpose of giving it that UV protection, you want to start early, and you want to keep updating that seal coating every couple of years. A lot of people will seal coat for aesthetic purposes. Just know that you're not getting in older pavement that UV damage has already taken place, and it's purely aesthetic. The cost for seal coating older pavement is typically cost prohibitive. And it's for larger applications, it's not worth doing. It's cost prohibitive. More crack repair, some more seal coating again. This is an older pavement. It's aesthetic. You will need to restripe because that seal coating is going to cover your older striping. You'll need to restripe as well. That's a cost consideration if you are seal coating. And that concludes my presentation. So I'm going to just go over in the last couple minutes we have here. I see some questions that I have in the chat. So new pavement is not as good as older pavement. Again, alluding to those materials, the materials that we use today, they serve their purpose, and they do perform if you maintain them. They're just made out of different materials. They're a little more brittle than the older asphalt materials. So you may, like I said, you may see some stress cracking that's happening in the first, say, 5 years. You'll often see that between pavement structure, you've got two catch basins on either side of the street with a manhole in between. That's kind of a weak point in the pavement. And remember, pavement's going to fail starting at its weakest point. So you might see some cracks starting to open up there in those areas. Will we have access to the presentation on your website? If you let Chelsea know, she can provide a copy of this presentation and you will have it. How best to deal with sewer lines, electrical gas lines that run under the asphalt surface. Replacement may be needed in these lines as part of a pavement project, and you are absolutely right. I will say though that they are not part of a pavement project. If you know that you have issues, or if your utility company knows that you have issues and they need to come in and they need to do repairs, you want to get those taken care of before you do a pavement project. So just by way of example, I had a community that knew they had some water line work that the utility owned the utility beneath the street, and they knew that they needed to come and do some work. They delayed the project for 2 years to give the utility company time to come in and do those repairs. You may want to give a call to the utility company if you have the utility owns the water line or the sewer line beneath your roadways, to just let them know you're doing a roadway project and are there any known repairs that they have on the schedule to do. So you want to get that taken care of before you do your pavement project. We have a question here. You said driveways are different than pavement. How are they different? Driveways are constructed differently. Roadway pavement, if you remember those layers that I mentioned, and I'm just going to give you, typically your community may have something different, but typically you will have 6 inches of the aggregate subbase, and that's overlaid with 4 inches of an asphalt base course that's overlaid with 1.5 to 2 inches of top course. Driveways are constructed differently. Driveways can be constructed in a number of different ways. If you're doing a driveway project, you want to get cores there as well. But when we replace driveways, we want that 4 to 6 inches of aggregate base overlaid by 2 inches of base course overlaid by 2 inches of top course. I will tell you that when we do the cores, original construction doesn't always match that. So you may only have 2 inches of an asphalt that's put over, say 4 inches of a base course. So when we're doing driveways, we completely demolish the asphalt and we rebuild the asphalt layers. That's the best way to do driveways. There's really, unless you have 6 inches of asphalt on your driveways, which I have never encountered, you really can't do a mill and pave on a driveway. You have to completely demolish the asphalt, and you can leave the base course there, and then rebuild the asphalt. So it's a different approach, different thicknesses to the asphalt. We are at 10:30, so I'm gonna continue if you need to go. I'm just gonna go through and answer the questions quickly. You're welcome to stay. But this concludes our presentation for today. Again, you can contact either me or Chelsea Broadmerkle if you want a copy of this presentation. If you're taking this webinar for credits, again, contact Chelsea Broadmerkle and she can provide you with proof of that attendance.
And I'll be sending, just to jump in there, Melissa, sorry. I'll be sending an email to everyone. So don't worry if you don't have my email right now. I'm going to be sending an email to everyone with a copy of the presentation. And then just you can reply to that for your certificate and I will send it to you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Chelsea.
Of course.
All right, so I'll just go through the rest of these questions because I know that I've gone over on time here again. If you need to leave, please do. Let's see, we may need to decide the best phase approach to a parking lot project before we bid any parts of the overall. Should we repair sewer lines under, yeah, so again, you want to make sure that your utilities are in good order so you don't have to dig up your new pavement to do anything under there first. Let's see, what is your opinion of micro surfacing? Our roads are in good shape because of regular maintenance and my traffic, but we are 19 years old. According to the contractor, this process will give us another 12 to 15 years of life. Again, that reflective cracking is always an issue. I've seen good results with the micro surfacing. If your pavement is in generally good condition, even though it's reaching the end of a useful life that it would typically have, you can realize some benefits from using the microsurfacing. If your pavement's in bad condition, it's going to be throwing away money. So again, as with an overlay, it's not a fix. It's a Band-Aid, but it can buy you a couple of more years if your pavement is in generally good condition. After new paving, what sort of vendor repaints the parking lines? Does New Jersey have laws providing handicap parking spots? So let me take those one at a time. The paving contractor will typically use a subcontractor to come in and do the striping. That's usually part of the pavement project. And you don't need to call, the association doesn't need to make separate arrangements for that to come in and be done when the pavement is done. The contractor that you're using will either do it themselves or have a subcontractor that comes in and does that. In regard to New Jersey laws about handicap parking spots, they do. It applies to new construction. If you are doing a remediation on your existing pavement, if you are replacing what's there, again, our specifications specify that you are going to be replacing that striping in the way that it was before you did the project. We don't get into figuring out where you need handicap spaces. If you know in advance that you need to provide some barrier-free parking or there's some other striping considerations, the time to talk about that is with your contractor before the project begins. But your engineer does not do an evaluation of the need for barrier-free spaces. We specify to replace what is there. And again, if you're moving parking around, it may involve, in some cases, some municipal approval. So just keep that in mind before you start changing parking spaces. And it looks like that is the end of the questions. So if you think of anything else, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is there at the bottom of that um, of the screen shot there. And please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you for your time today and have a great day.